AAPC local chapters are the backbone of our professional community, setting standards for professionalism and higher education. They provide supportive environments for personal improvement as well as strong networking opportunities. But what is a local chapter? As an AAPC member, you are automatically assigned a local chapter, and it's based off of your zip code and your local chapter zip code, so whatever is the closest proximity to you. Local chapters are technically a different entity from the AAPC. They are the AAPCCA or AAPC Chapter Association, so they have different types of financials and record-keeping stuff. So the AAPCCA's main goal is to maintain and support the infrastructure of the AAPC's members and support the local chapters. So empowering these local chapters to function somewhat independently in order to provide things that the membership needs, like educational opportunities and networking opportunities. So each local chapter operates under the direction of the chapter association and is managed by local chapter officers. So while the chapter association sort of oversees it, each one is managed by a team of volunteers for that local chapter, and they each have different roles. There's 3 positions that a chapter has to have filled in order to stay in good standing and stay open, essentially, and that is the president, vice president, and then a combined secretary treasurer, but those ideally should be separate positions. The other positions available are education officer and member development officer. The president is the leader. They're kind of in charge of the overall well-being of the chapter and coordinating all of the activities, making sure that things are organized appropriately. The vice president assists the president and takes over their responsibilities in the absence of the president. The secretary treasurer handles administrative and financial matters. The education officer coordinates the educational content and applies for CEUs. And then the member development officer kind of coordinates welcoming members, especially things like new members, making sure they're integrated into the chapter and encouraging some of that networking to happen. Now, local chapter officers are a team, so just because one has an assigned role doesn't mean that others can't assist with that task. For example, just because the education officer is supposed to apply for CEUs doesn't mean that the secretary can help out with that or that the vice president can't help find speakers. Local chapter officers are expected to promote the AAPC and its mission, but also to communicate the concerns of their local chapter members to the AAPC. Plus, they have to hold 6 educational events a year. Now, this can be a combination of like in-person, virtual, review classes, seminars, etc. Recently, it's been a requirement of local chapters to have either a review class or a local chapter seminar. That kind of came into fruition in 2024 because local chapters used to host the certification exams and were reimbursed a small fee for each examinee that they hosted at their local chapter. Now, because of moving to exam centers, they've lost those funds. So there was a big look at, well, how are we going to make money as local chapters when we're not hosting exams anymore? A lot of chapters made a ton of money hosting these exams. So I guess the decision was, in order to recoup some of that money, they would look at local chapters as more of training centers, and thus providing things like reviews and seminars would be an opportunity to add some additional funding to the local chapters. Now, personally, and this is just my opinion, not that anyone ever asks me, but if it was up to me, I would have just had the local chapter reviews be more regional, use our AAPC approved instructors that we know are tried and true, they're great at doing this education, and just reimbursed the local chapters for each one of their chapter members that attended the regional review. I feel like there's only so many really skilled, trained, willing instructors, and then asking local chapter officers to take that on too and do train the trainers, that's a big ask for a 100% volunteer position. Now, going back to talking about funds, now chapters do receive a reimbursement for each member that attends a meeting. It's not much, it's like $1 or $2 per member, but the officers do have to be very transparent in how they are spending that money. So they have to submit financial records every month. They have to talk to their members and get approval for large expenditures. So they have to abide by the financial obligations and the guidelines that are set by the chapter association. Now, that being said, it really is up to the chapter officers and members as far as what they want to spend that money on, provided it's for the development of the chapter and the members of the chapter. So not like paying for a spa day for the chapter officers, but let's say we want to have a networking day. We can say, hey, is everyone in agreement that we should spend the money on a networking day, and we're going to pay for the location, the coffee, the tea, the muffins, all the food, or even things like raffle items. Now, other chapters might say, hey, we don't want to spend that money. We're going to have a potluck and have everyone else bring the food as a volunteer, but then we can spend more money on like giveaways, books, and subscription services, maybe even just some nice things like Amazon gift cards. One of the great benefits of being part of your local chapter is those networking opportunities. Local chapters really provide that platform for members to come together and connect and talk and network and share their experiences. So officers should really be working on making that welcoming environment to encourage things like mentorship. Now, experiences with local chapters can vary quite a bit. There's some that just historically are kind of stuck in their ways. They're like, yep, we have meetings every second Wednesday of the month. We never deter from that. So-and-so has to have it. It has to be at this place at this time. And they just keep doing it that way because that's the way that they think they have to do it. It's the way that it's always been done, and they feel like they can't deter from that. Then there's other chapters that will go above and beyond. We talked about how they have to have 6 educational events. Well, some chapters will go, yeah, well, we have to have one every month. We have to have 12, and we have to have a networking, and we have to have a seminar. And they'll wind up burning themselves out and stressing out between the officers and having conflict just because they're trying to do more than is comfortable for everyone. One of my personal pet peeves is when local chapters run their virtual meetings more like webinars instead of doing all of the chapter business. I've spoken at chapters before where I've come in and they've gone, yeah, hey, thanks for coming to our webinar. This is Victoria, and she's here to talk about ICD 10CM. All right, go Victoria. But you do have to allow for some grace because, again, this is 100% volunteer position, and everyone else has their own things going on in life. They have their own stressors, they have bad days at work, and sometimes they can't perform at the highest level that maybe we would like them to. Sometimes chapters are on the verge of closing and someone will come in and they will rise to the occasion, and others are just kind of going through the motions. One of the common themes is that we have a lot of chapters with hundreds of members and people don't want to volunteer as officers. And honestly, if you look at things in advance and structure it and go, okay, here's the dates, here's the things, and kind of make a one-day planning session, it really makes the rest of the year pretty easy. So if you structure it appropriately, it's great. But if you have some weak links, that can really exacerbate some situations. But if you're ever concerned about your local chapter, you can kindly and professionally communicate that. Like, let's say people aren't muting themselves appropriately on meetings and you're like, hey, I think they didn't set the meeting up correctly when they organized it. Just have that feedback for your officers. And hey, October is when we have elections every single year. If you want to see those changes, be the change you want to see in the world. Each officer can serve up to 2 consecutive years. I know in the past they've made some exceptions to that. I don't know if they still do or not, but it really is important for those roles to change and to get some new people in them so we have fresh ideas and fresh opportunities. Again, we do have chapters that sort of have this old guard. They are like, we've always done it with this chapter for the past 15, 20 years. We have it at this place. We do this. There's just a big struggle now with when we keep these old, outdated methodologies of how we execute things. Bringing in the newcomers is a lot more difficult because they don't want the old fuddy-duddy stuff going on. And honestly, a lot of people get that sense of community from other places outside of local chapters. They might get it from a church, a gaming community, cosplay groups, community centers, anime conventions. Like, people are gathering based off of their hobbies and interests and getting that sense of community there. And they might honestly just not be interested in the professional community and getting the support in that arena because they're getting that fulfillment for their networking and their connections otherwise filled. One of the areas that I've struggled with my associations with local chapters in the past has been, when you're in love with local chapters and you think they're amazing, you become biased towards them and you almost want to force people to go into local chapters. But if people aren't interested in that professional community because they're getting all of that from a spiritual community or a hobby community, I don't think it's appropriate to force people into that professional spectrum when they're not interested. Having said that, though, there are amazing communities that have been built around medical coding. I know a bunch of people that have met best friends at medical coding conferences. And unless people that have more progressive ideas like you, like me, come in and insert ourselves into these spaces, they're not going to have any idea what we want, and they might still continue doing the same mundane, boring, monotonous stuff. But that does require you to come up with some ideas of what you do want and not just complain about the stuff that you don't like. Now, one of the most prominent things about local chapters, and one of the things that people love the most about them, is they can get free or cheap CEUs. Currently, you can visit whatever local chapters, either physically or virtually, but do pay attention now because some are starting to charge some small fees for non-members of their local chapter if they are attending, or they might have capacity issues. They might say, hey, we have an account that can only hold 100 virtual meeting attendees, so we're going to let our local chapter members in first and then accommodate what we can beyond that from non-local chapter members. Where I'm located, I'm fortunate enough to be within a 90-minute drive of several local chapters, so it's not unheard of me to go to Reading, Philadelphia, Lancaster, York, all of these different local chapters. And you can get updates from a lot of other local chapters, not just the one that you're assigned. If you go into your profile and preferences and then under local chapters on your AAPC account, you can not only change your local chapter designation, so maybe you work somewhere else that's closer to a different chapter and you want to change it to that one, you can change your local chapter and you can subscribe to other chapters. So I'm subscribed to the Philadelphia chapter, the York chapter, the Lancaster chapter, because if they're having a really cool meeting, I might want to go. I'm also subscribed to some ones in Florida because I just have a lot of friends there that I know host really cool meetings. But you really, really do need to get involved in your local chapter. I know a lot of managers and supervisors that will give preference to people that they know are active in their local chapter. It does demonstrate a lot more dedication to the field. Being a part of your AAPC local chapter is a great way to enhance your career, learn new skills, and network with others. If you're not already involved with your local chapter, you absolutely need to be. And you don't have to volunteer as an officer right away if you want to help out. There's other ways you can help out. You can help out with just finding speakers or helping locations or bringing snacks to a meeting. Get involved, get inspired, and get out there and push some new ideas. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next video. And until then, just keep on coding on.